And like Mike said, this is a very important topic to me. And it's probably predominantly, and hopefully you can see this on the screen, it's a picture of myself and my family. And so my wife, Kristen, my daughter, Grace, and my son, Mark. And nothing I've done in my life has made me happier than being a dad. And so my friends joke, they call me a dad nerd. I love being a parent. I love being a father. I love being married. It's one of the things that I really have found tremendous joy and pleasure with in my life. And one of the challenges that we have, those of us that like that role, is trying to also be great as a parent, a practitioner, and a partner. And so whether you're married, living with somebody, in a committed relationship, it doesn't matter, but you're always trying to do a struggle with the juggle, and you're trying to figure out, how do I balance the roles that I have in my life? And really, for us, the topic today is one that's so critically important. It's probably, there's no one more time-starved probably than the practicing parent, whether it's a mom or a dad, trying to figure out how to make it all work. And so there's three things I'd like you to consider as we look through this. So you have the parenting role, you have the practicing role, and you have the partnering role. And for me, parenting is raising children to even parenting your parents. So meaning that you're in a position where you have to take care of an elderly parent. So in my case, my father is 89, and we're balancing raising kids and taking care of my father. So we have this sandwich generation problem. So parenting your parent, whether we want to look at. Two, partnering, being committed in a committed relationship, especially under the same roof, is how I'm defining this. And also co-parenting could absolutely be in a partnering arrangement. And then practicing expectations abound everywhere. What does practicing look like? How does it make? How does it play out? And all three of these are unlimited magnets for attention and resources. They're just unlimited. And just a quagmire of emotional issues that you can probably never be good enough. You can't live up to all the standards. You can't live up to all the expectations. There's a lot going on here. So there's a lot of emotional stress. So our goal is to really look at this and look at where you can cultivate harmony here. Just how do you find some form of peace and harmony between everything you're dealing with? You can't possibly do all three well, but you can choose pieces of each thing. Life is kind of like a buffet. You can't get everything on one plate, but you can choose what to put on your plate. And that's probably the biggest thing about this, is deciding what goes on that plate and living with that. And one of the jokes in preparation for today's program, one of the jokes that one of my coworkers said, don't forget to tell them not to compare their lives to everybody else's. And I said, well, of course, I'll tell them that. But one of the worst places to get advice at trying to cultivate harmony here is your single friends. My single friends and my friends without kids are unlimited sources for advice on how to balance this. And they're the worst people to get advice from. They have no idea. They've never walked a mile in your shoes. So they've never been there. So you have to, when you look at this, you have to really learn from other people that have balanced all three of these things. So when you look at this, and we work at a couple lessons today, or a couple perhaps strategies today, I'm just going to encourage you to listen to people that have walked this path, not necessarily to people that may only be walking part of this path. Okay, great. So let's talk about parenting. So parenting, ball one for us, is really trying to figure out, how do you think about being a good parent and integrate this in your life as a practitioner. So here's our first strategy. And this is going to be counterintuitive to what you're going to hear elsewhere out in the marketplace. My first strategy is plan your family time first before you plan your work week. Usually what we do as practitioners is we just go along with the flow of our calendar, and we do whatever our calendar demands of us, and we don't actually protect the time for our family, actually squeeze in our family at the end of a work week. So I'm going to suggest you flip that. The first thing you want to do is break out your calendar. In my case, I still use a paper calendar. I find it far more effective than an electronic calendar because it allows me to look at my electronic calendar and plan my week and allows me to protect my family time first. Second strategy is what we consider a family meeting. Now, I'm going to give you an agenda for a family meeting, but every week we sit together as a family and we talk through what our week's going to look like. For me, it's either a Saturday, a Sunday that I usually do this, sometimes Sunday mornings. And for me, it really becomes a critical planning session. And we're talking through, and we've been doing it for years as a family, thinking through what the week looks like as a family. What are the resources that the kids will need? What are the scheduling issues that are going to go on? My wife works, I work, we both work. You know, who's going to do what, who's covering what. So we have to work through these particular issues. And then we try and do a family activity at least one time a week or at least one night a week. And whatever that is, we get together on that family meeting and discuss it. And we kind of think through what's that going to look like? What do we want to do? How do we want to make it work? And then for me, I go for at least 3 family dinners a week. And the 3 family dinners, if you can do more than 3, that's fantastic. 3 family dinners, and over dinner, we try and build community and relationship by a couple of questions. One of the things I like to do is discuss wins and gratitude. So usually when I taught this with my kids and started with my kids, I started with one thing per week. One thing per day. So what I would say is, what was great about your day? What was a great thing that happened today? Because if you don't control the current of the family dinner, it basically can devolve into complaints, it can devolve into frustrations, it can devolve into, so what did you do today at school? What did you do here? So you want to think about that family dinner is a really sacred time. It's probably the only time you get to tell family stories, teach values, create culture, family culture. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is with great questions. So for me, what's a great thing that happened for today? And we always take turns and we kind of go around. And it took a while for me to develop a gratitude muscle with my children and my spouse. And we started with 1, and we typically average about 5 a dinner. And so that's probably for 4 of us. So you're talking about 20 different things that happen great. What usually ends up happening for us is energy picks up from the family dinner, and we start to look forward to it, because it's not a parenting opportunity where I correct them on behavior. It's not an opportunity where I'm saying, you know, you should be doing better at school, you should be doing this. I use it to complain to my wife about my job, my, you know, whatever. What I do is use it to express gratitude to what was great about my life, what was great about the family. And I usually acknowledge each person's share. I usually say, that's fantastic, that's really brilliant, I love the way you shared that. So I use the family dinner as an oasis away from all the stress, the electronics, and the pressure that we're all feeling. So I really try and protect that. And then last but not least is I try and shoot for 1 family weekend per quarter as a getaway if possible. So with parenting, you want to look for dedicated time, and you want to begin your week planning that dedicated time first before you plan anything with your practice. Here's a sample family meeting agenda. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it today. I could do 1 to 2 hours just on how to structure a family meeting agenda. In this case, I usually start my family meeting agenda on Sunday morning with a positive focus or wins, like what happened great during the week, any follow-up items, family goals. We typically, as a family, talk about our goals for the year. We look ahead for the week, see what the scheduling conflicts are. Do we have any travel issues that we need to think through? Any school events needs, anything that, you know, the kids might need, or my wife might need, or I might need. And then any plans, what are our plans for the week? So it can take about an hour, sometimes 90 minutes. But I found this to be a very, very effective way of making sure that in our family, we have a really good conversation about what the week looks like, so there's no surprises. And, you know, we talk about the schedule for the week, everything from chore issues. We typically share the chores with kids. And then we usually end it with a 15-minute cleaning sprint or a follow-up item. And so this is just a simple example of a family agenda or a family meeting. So I'm going to encourage you to try and experiment with that, maybe take it on for 90 days. Those of you that are following along with the worksheet, you know, maybe put that down as a possible idea in your worksheet, whatever the case may be. Number 2 is partnering. Now, I define partnering once again as being in a committed relationship, typically under the same roof. It could be co-parenting, whatever works for you as far as defining this. But this is usually meaning that you're going to be talking with the person that you have the most emotional investment with. And for me, it's really important to make sure that you're both swimming in the same direction. If you don't communicate, it doesn't matter which direction you're swimming because you're swimming in opposite directions. So one of the critical things is looking at how do you partner and communicate. How do you find an opportunity? And it can't be, at the end of the night, my wife and I have ground rules. Don't talk to me about money before coffee, and don't talk to me about work after 8 o'clock. Just leave those, let me wind down and go to sleep. And then in the morning, let me have a cup of coffee before we start talking about work. So we actually have to usually create ground rules or strategies to figure out when's the best time to communicate. And my wife and I for years have worked off of 1-year goals and 90-day goals because goal setting in itself forces communication. And this is what a lot of people miss. They think goal setting is about achieving. Nah. Goal setting is at the heart of it about communicating what's important to you. And the goal setting is a bridge to climb across or walk across to the other person and say, this is important to me. Is this also important to you? And a lot of people think goal setting is about achievement. Nah. You want to think about goal setting as a way of communicating to somebody that you really care about. This is how you see the future and what you'd like to plan the future to be. And then making sure that you plan time for this person so that they can communicate and you can hang out together and do whatever it is that you want to do together. But I typically will have a weekly meeting with my spouse. Usually it's over lunch, sometimes it's over breakfast. We typically talk about a few things that are really important to us. We have couples goals that we share and discuss. We try and get a date night, but sometimes that doesn't always work. But if I go for a weekly date night, I know I might get it every other week. It might be a date night that we have every other week, but at the end of the time, it's really trying to get it on the calendar, making sure it works for her and works for me. And then I'd like to go for 1 weekend away per quarter, just she and I, that we can go talk and spend some time together and stay connected together. Now, sometimes it doesn't work for 1 a quarter, but I know if I shoot for 1 a quarter, it's a higher probability of having that happen than not at all. And then, of course, one of the fabulous books out there is Understanding the 5 Love Languages. So I'm a big fan of that book because once I understood my wife's love language, I became a lot more effective and a lot better partner in talking to her in the way that she heard I love you. So it's a fantastic book. Gary Chapman's the author. You can Google it. You can find it on Amazon. It's all over the place. He wrote it about probably 20 or 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago now. And he was he's a marriage counselor. And he talks about how certain people hear the words I love you differently. So it's a fabulous book. So I always try and practice and develop a habit of trying to talk to my wife in her love language. And then last but not least, of course, is practicing. And practicing is critical because that's where the cash flow comes from, right? If you're going to pay to give your kids a great quality of life, if you're going to pay to make sure your spouse has a great lifestyle, practicing is your professional commitment. It's what you've chosen to do as a career. And we have to be in a position where we have thought through how do we possibly integrate this between all of Steve's crazy ideas about family meetings and meeting with your partner. How do we also squeeze in practicing, our third ball? Well, I've got a couple of suggestions. One, when it comes to planning for your practice, my strongest suggestion is plan your work week after you plan your parenting and partnering time. And I mean after. This is probably the biggest mistake I made in my life. The biggest mistake the people I've coached have made is trying to squeeze in what's really important after all the juice is squeezed out of your week. So if you look at the week and you got 7 remarkable days and you're trying to make the best out of these 7 remarkable days, the first thing I'm going to recommend that you protect is the parenting time. The second thing I'm going to strongly recommend is your partnering time. And then with what's left, you put into the practice, your practicing time. And most lawyers make this horrible mistake of sacrificing their relationships, their parenting time and their partnering time for their practice. And the practice will consume whatever you give it. Bad clients will take everything they can from you. Poorly trained staff will consume as much oxygen as you give them. And so really using this as a way of kind of creating a boundary, a time boundary, if you will, around what you'll give your practice is a core element of the strategy. Now, for me, I recommend strongly a paper planner. And this is one of the reasons that our company has a paper planner. And yes, it's really a paper planner. I find it better for decision making. I find it better for focus, and I find it better for reflecting. So for me personally, the opportunity to play out my planner, and I apologize, I'm having tech issues, obviously. I can't show my camera, otherwise I'll show you the planner and kind of how I do it. But for me, I really take the time, and for me, it's usually Monday morning or Sunday afternoon. I take the time and look at my week, and I ask myself, where am I going to protect my parenting time, the quality time with my kids? Where am I going to protect the quality time with my spouse? And then how am I going to make that work with my practice? We're taught to do it the opposite, which is practice first, everybody else second. And consequently, everybody else gets squished, and you just don't have the life that you want. This is why I think so many lawyers have such a high level of resentment towards their practices. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the next strategy, which is you. Oh, let me back up. I forgot. The planner itself that I put up on the screen is our company's planner. It's the planner that we use in our group programs, the practice growth program, dominate your market programs, and the one-on-one coaching program. So that's what's up there. You see the newest version on our website. It's an older version, the red cover version. It doesn't really matter what planner you use, as long as you're using something that allows you to think, reflect, and decide about what your week should look like. Most of us as practitioners usually use a case management system. If we're not in a great position to do that financially, we might be using Outlook. But you want to be focus-driven, not calendar-driven. And being focus-driven allows you to choose what you're going to do with your week, whereas being calendar-driven, the week is kind of being chosen for you. You're just kind of jumping in and swimming along with the river. And that's why at the end of the week, you pop up and go, my God, I got nothing. I feel like I got nothing done. It's because you never got an opportunity to prioritize your week. Now, I do want to say something about the planner. I should say about using a planner. I did a podcast a couple of months ago, and the lawyer says, look, I got, I think he said 5 kids under the age of, 8. And my wife and I both work, and I have no time to do a planner. And my response was then do 5 minutes for focus. If you don't have time to do a planner, I don't care if you do a sticky note. I don't care if you write it on a legal pad, but you need to take about a 5-minute sprint to focus the week, and a 5-minute daily sprint to focus your day. Otherwise, you're going to have a real sense of burnout over a period of time, a real sense of resentment, a real sense of almost a depression, because you're not rejuvenating what's important to you from a values perspective. You're not reinvigorating and reinvesting and building momentum. And really using a planner that allows you to reflect, decide, and focus what you're doing for the week will actually give you energy and start to build momentum from you rather than take it away. That's like how I always recommend a paper planner. Now, with that, let's talk about you. One of the things that I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend is that we've got to protect you in this process. And if you've been on an airplane recently, some of us have, some of us haven't, one of the things that you're confronted with is if there's a problem and there's a crisis, the first thing the flight attendant tells you to do is to put the oxygen mask on you first. And if it goes on you first, then you can put it on anyone around you to help the other people around you. One of the challenges with this particular lifestyle of parenting, practicing, and partnering is that we have a tendency to throw ourselves under the bus. We have a tendency to sacrifice our own well-being. And I think it's a huge mistake. I think one of the things that you want to do is take great care of yourself. Set a good example for your family, your friends, and your team, because everyone's watching you. You can tell them things, it doesn't matter. If you tell your kids they should exercise and sleep well and eat well, and they watch you living off of caffeine, energy drinks, and a protein bar, they're going to pick up the same habits because they're going to do as you do, not do as you say. This is one of the things that really stinks about being a parent, is you have to walk your talk. And you have to walk your talk as a leader inside your firm. So probably the three core elements is looking at your spiritual life, whether that's through act of faith or whether it's through meditation. You've got to have some kind of spiritual practice to actually rejuvenate yourself. 2, nutrition and exercise. You want to think of the practice of law like a professional athlete thinks about performance. You're being paid to solve complex problems. You're being paid to help people through sometimes the worst parts of their lives and really difficult decisions. So you trying to do that with the intention of burning yourself out and wearing yourself out, it's not going to work. Now, when you're a young associate and you're maybe in your 20s, no big deal. Your boss really likes you. You know, the partners really like you, throwing yourself under the bus, working 68 hours a week. With a slim hope of becoming a partner in the firm that you're going into, with the hope of squeezing every hour out of your billable life. And they're fine if you don't eat well, they're fine if you don't take good care of yourself. But you've got to ask yourself, what's your long-term gain? Will that be your plan for the rest of your life? Will you go until you drop? Or will you realize, you know, this is actually important, that nutrition and exercise are critical to peak performance, and people are really paying for your peak performance, not for you to work yourself into an early grave. So nutrition, exercise, critical. I don't care what diet you follow, whether it's keto diet, the zone diet, the paleo diet, the high fat, low carb diet, whatever it is that you want to follow, you follow. But you've got to find a nutrition and exercise regime that works for you. And then really important, sleep, relaxation, and rejuvenation. Because we don't have you performing and thinking at peak performance, then you'll never be able to in a position to balance the harmony. Now, it's probably the exact opposite what you expected me to say. You thought I would come on this webinar today and say, do this, that, and the other thing, and you'll magically have a great life. No, these are skills, and these are skills that you have to learn. These are skills that you have to develop. These are skills that you will have to cultivate to be better at the 3 Ps, parenting, partnering, and practicing. And that's where you develop the harmony in your life. Now, I do have one piece of time management advice. And my guess is that your calendar kind of looks like this jelly bean jar right here, where they're just packed and you have no room to grow, no room to move, no room to breathe. And if you're really trying to make some changes, you're going to have to kind of shift to the jelly bean jar that looks like this, which is you have a little bit of room to breathe, a little bit of room to make changes. And to get there, you've got to make some time management changes. You may have to say no to bad cases, which is sometimes hard to do when you're trying to build a practice. You may have to say no to volunteer obligations, especially, you know, when you see all of your friends that aren't practicing volunteer for everything at school. You know, they're winning the Parent of the Year award at the school. You know, that's a tough thing to do, but they're not practicing. You know, they're in a really great position where they can do that. So you have to kind of have your own boundaries. And you have to be really, really clear that you have to run your own race. And running your own race requires you to be clear about the changes you want to make in your life. And to make any form of change, you need a compelling reason. You need a system accountability, and you need coaching and guidance. And for me, and everything that I've shared with you today in this brief period of time, and I apologize, Mike apologizes, we had a technical snafu that then compounded to another technical snafu that put us in a really awkward position where we're late for today's webinar, and I don't even get a chance to share my, maybe it works to my advantage not being able to share my camera, but at the end of the day, we're here to try and help you because I've been through this process before. I've helped hundreds of lawyers through this process before. And my suggestion is that you can't be years ahead of the game. You only can be about 30, 60 to 90 days ahead of the game. I always told my wife, we can't, don't worry about what the kids are going to be like in 10 years. Just be 90 days ahead of the kids. As long as we be 90 days ahead of the kids with our planning and thinking, we're going to win the parenting game. We may not be a decade ahead. Just stay 90 days ahead. In some cases, 9 minutes would be good. But most of the time, we're trying to stay a couple of months ahead of the kids of what their needs might be, what their life might be, how can we support them and nurture them and help grow them into be functional adults. Now, with that being said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do the exercise. Mike gave you a really quick worksheet from learning to action. And I'm just going to give you a minute to capture your thinking, because it's one thing to learn something, it's another thing to do with what you learned. And I don't really want to be having you join today and not capture some form of learning. So we have an example here. And so this is Jane, today's date. And her ideas were family meeting, date night, maybe starting an exercise program, plan family time first, which I strongly recommend, gratitude at dinner, maybe do a family calendar, and go on a volunteer diet. I can't volunteer for everything. Now, with all ideas, we can't do them all. So in this case, we have to talk about the top 3. Number 1 would be family meeting is critical for my kids. So I think I'm going to do a family meeting. My number 2 is I got to free up more time by unvolunteering. I just got to pick out one volunteer thing, and my wife and I both have an agreement. We agree to volunteer only for one thing at a time, and the other person has to agree with that. In my case, I'm on a board of a college, which is very near and dear to me, and that's my agreement, and my wife's got a volunteer commitment for another association, and that's her agreement. But no one can approach me without me getting my wife to agree that I can volunteer for something other than one thing. And then no reading email after 7 o'clock so I can focus on my family. So at a certain point in time, you put down the electronic leash, your phone, your email, your tablet, your phone, your whatever it is, and stop. And stop, spend the time with the kids, and then call it a day. Because whatever you do after a certain period of time is pretty much ineffective. And then each of these are next actions. Family meeting, talk to my spouse, maybe start a small agenda. It doesn't have to be as crazy and comprehensive as mine, because mine developed over 10 years. 2, choose the most vital one to keep, resign from everything else of my volunteering, and set up an autoresponder and turn off the phone after a certain point in time, which is perfect. My most important action is going to be, in this case, no email. Call my spouse to set up a time and to walk through the ideas about what we can do first. And the biggest takeaway in this particular example is if I don't make time to protect it for my family, we'll feel disconnected and feel alienated. And then I'll ask myself, why am I working so hard when nobody seems to care about me working so hard? Which is a horrible thing to feel. You talk about a life of futility. Those of you who study Greek mythology, that's the myth of Sisyphus, pushing a big boulder up the hill and having it roll back over the top of you every day. That's what a lot of lawyers practice like. And really what we're fighting for is your future and fighting for your skills to build a better future. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And I'll be quiet give myself a minute to be quiet and let you capture any notes. And then we'll open it up for any questions or thoughts that you have. Those of you who are done with this exercise, just do me a favor and put in the chat box so Mike can do a shout out. What your biggest takeaway is out of today's call. What's your biggest takeaway out of today's call? And while you do that, I do have a quick poll for you. Mike, do you think you can help me out with the poll while we move forward with this?
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen now.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is quick poll. This is an area that I'm very passionate about, and I'm trying to figure out how to help a lot of my brothers and sisters of the bar who are going through this process. And what we're going to do is just do a very brief poll. Mike, you want to walk them through the poll, or you want me to do it?
I can do it for you. So if you could, we are wanting to take today's session and build it into a series or additional content that we feel will be useful to you. So if you would select one of these items, which would interest you more? A full day of an online workshop diving deeper into today's topic with additional strategies and a chance to do breakout sessions with further exercises and more tools to help you? Or would you rather join a coaching group that consists just of lawyers with children and the issues that you face as a practitioner and being a parent? Or would you rather subscribe to a podcast tailored to lawyers with children and the unique challenges that you face? So we'll give it another 10 seconds on the poll. So if you just select an answer for us, that'd be a lot of help to us in knowing what we can deliver for you that would be of use. Give me another 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close out the poll. All right, Steve, there you go.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Appreciate that. And then if there's anything, any questions or anything like that that you have, feel free to either post them in the chat box or unmute yourself. And I'll do anything I can to clarify or support you with your parenting, partnering, and practice issues, as Mike likes to call it, the struggle for the juggle, which I love. I just love that. So Mike, I'm just going to turn to you, see if anybody's got any questions or anything they'd like to talk about.
We just had one suggestion on the poll. One person would actually have suggested something for folks with aging parents, caring for aging parents, the sandwich generation issues. And that is something that we've talked about as well. Again, anyone who has any questions, you can raise your hand icon or put your question into the chat box, and we will take that aloud for you. If you'd like it to remain anonymous, just make sure that you indicate so in your question. All right, we have no other questions at this time. Steve, thank you so much for today's session. And thank you everybody for your patience for our late start. We really appreciate it. If you missed any portion of today, we are recording it and we'll have it up on our website as soon as possible, and we'll email you a link to watch it and share it with anyone that you think could get some good use out of today's recording as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.